Live.
Hey everybody, happy Monday. I'm Jill Buck, Celebrity Artist with Joico, and today I'm going to be sharing with you guys my winter blonding technique. I feel like this is coming at the perfect time where we have clients who have been super blonde through summer and a little bit into fall. And I'm going to kind of show you guys how I've been working and doing that on Blair's hair specifically. She is one of my good friends and clients, and we've been working her out of that really super blonde look. So I want to show you guys kind of what her maintenance is through the winter and why my clients love this technique so much. So we'll get right into that. Real quick though, you guys, I have my assistant Serena here helping, and she is here to answer any questions that you guys have. So please, I love when these lives become more interactive and I don't feel like I'm just talking at you guys. So please chime in, help other people out in the chat, give each other tips and tricks as we go, and really let's just help each other out and become better at what we do. So we'll get started here. Just as kind of like a foundation so you guys can see, Blair's hair, she's about a level 7 and she has a ton of hair, but her strands are fine. So even though she has so much hair, I'm really only going to be working with Blonde Life 10 volume and 20 volume. I won't ever do anything more on her hair because she just doesn't, I don't have that much that I have to punch through, right? So when you are working on your formulations, take into consideration the texture and the density of each of their strands, not necessarily just the color that they are. So even if I have a client that's a level 4, if she had texture like Blair's, I would still be using the same developers. Another addition for your clients, I'm sure you guys by now have heard about Joico's Defy Damage, their Pro Series here. This is a keratin-based product, and I'm really going to be keeping this kind of focused on the front because that's where we're working on Blair's hair today. This is a product that I honestly am now to the point where I'm putting it in every single client, whether I'm just giving them a haircut or we're doing color or whatever it is. It has just been such a great tool to add on, and I know that it's keeping my clients' hair protected and safe while I am doing a color service. Sometimes even if I'm just doing a haircut, I'll add it in there. Oh, you guys. Siri always says this to me. She's got to go. Sorry, lady. You can't hang with us today. Okay, so sorry about that. So just making sure that when you're using this product, you're spraying it away from your client's face. It's an aerosol spray, right? Just like a hairspray. You wouldn't come in here and blast your client. So short bursts, shake it up really good, and then spray down and away from the client's face. I even will put it in their ends just to give them a little extra love, right? Even on a haircut. So if you haven't tried this product yet, you definitely need to try it out. I don't have to do any adjusting in my developer by using this product. It doesn't go into the color, it just goes right into their hair. And I also love that because there's no guessing game then when it comes to, well, okay, well then do I need to up my developer and use, 5 volume higher or 10 volume higher? So I love that this is just doing its job. It's another tool that we can just kind of take our services to the next level for our clients. We want them to know that we're here to keep their hair beautiful and healthy, and we really truly do care about the longevity of the color in their hair as well. So then you just kind of comb it through a little bit, and you can kind of already see like how shiny it is. You know it's in there. All right, so the biggest thing about this technique today, I'm actually kind of considering this like an express service because I find, and what I feel like is more aesthetically pleasing in the winter is to have more depth in our blonde hair. Okay, so even if Blair's out on the beach in the summer, like naturally that's going to lighten up for her, right? So it's okay then that I have lots of highlights happening through the summer, but in the winter, we just do not see our clients blonding naturally as much. And that's even true for where we live here in sunny California. So I really want to try to mimic that. And it helps then as well because I'm creating way less maintenance for my client. And I feel like they appreciate that. When I tell them in the winter that they can go longer in between their next service, I feel like with the holidays, with expenses and all the things, I feel like they really, then it's another step where they trust me, and their hair still is super beautiful. So as far as sectioning goes, we're gonna go just right to the top of the ear. Now everyone's head shape's a little bit different here, so if you have a client that really has a round, kind of curving down, then you can maybe take a little bit less, or vice versa. If you have someone who has more of a flatter head here, you might go back a tiny bit more. Blair just has a perfectly shaped head, so I'm just going off of the top of her ear here. And then I'm doing a slight diagonal back right where I'm kind of going off of her hairline more than anything, okay? So it's not that it's right perfectly in her temple, and it's not here. Everything I do is based off of what each client has happening for them. So if I start this too low, right, and I'm laying in a hairline foil that goes down, this hair lays this way, right? So she's gonna feel very stripy right there. So I wanna make sure that when I go, and we'll kind of talk through my placement, but the idea here is I know I have a weaker spot in her hairline. I have to address that separately. So that's right where my sectioning is going. Okay, if her weaker spot started lower, I can take it lower as well. All right, so let's get into this. The goal here is to create that lightness and brightness around her face still, but using her depth to make that even more beautiful and blonde. So we'll go, make sure you guys can see. If at any point you guys can't see, please put it in the chat, because otherwise what's the point, right? So in here, I'm gonna be really mindful about taking probably three tighter pieces, so that tighter sections right around her hairline, because I really wanna make sure when she pulls all this up, she feels bright and beautiful, okay? So, and I'm doing what I call a skinny light. It's not a baby light. It's not a heavy weave. I've just, for whatever reason, been calling these more like a skinny light. And it just feels like it does the same impact. And I don't have to pack them in there like you do for a baby light. Okay, so I'm gonna go right up to her hairline here, and make sure that I'm going all the way up, because we'll do like a soft little tap on her hairline too. And then keeping those extra blondie pieces out of the formulation, okay? I don't want lightener overlapping on those super bright pieces. So I'm using Blonde Life 10 volume on her hairline. She does not need anything more than that, even though this is going to be a quick service with just minimal highlighting through here. She still does not need to be blasted with 30 volume or even 20 on these little baby guys in here because of the density of that. So I'm slightly kicking my sectioning back so I can start mimicking her hairline. The goal as we work up will be to kind of create a pivot method. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with a pivot method, but what that really helps for the winter blonding specifically is the grow out. If we are working with such, depth kind of happening in there from kind of slowly transitioning them out of that really bright summery blonde, we want to make sure that we don't create stripes, right? Because that can happen too. When you have a lot of client depth, then if you just go in and just square off the head, lay in some highlights, then it's frustrating because you feel like everything's so stripy. So the goal here is to always be rotating and moving around so that it really flows and falls perfectly. Okay, this is my third highlight right here, and you can kind of see now I'm working to the next curve section of her head. So for her specifically, she needed 3 right here. Some clients might need 2, some might need 4. So you're really working, always keeping the hairline, and you're going to be pivoting off of that hairline the whole way up. Rather than staying and focusing so much on a section, I really, really love to go off of kind of a client's facial feature, their hairline. If you've ever taken any of my other classes before, you know that I'm really big on just complementing what they already have, right? So if we need to draw attention to their eyes, their cheekbones, whatever it is, I'll use those facial features as where I'm going to be placing my brightest color pieces too. Make sure we tuck that out of the way. Okay, so here is where now I'm going to take, and I want to make sure I address all these pieces, because if we were to just keep going and slicing this way on here, the hair doesn't always lay this way, right? When our client drops these down, I would end up with these like stripes running through here. So now it's time to start pivoting and adjusting, and I'm going to be addressing this section on Blair, and then we'll be following up behind it. So we're going in here. These pieces are super fragile in here, so sometimes if you need to, even kick that down a little bit. Use a 7 volume, use a 5, whatever is going to be best for your client's hair. Or you can also just pull that out earlier. I'll do that a lot with my clients. I will go through, and even if I am on the other side, but this side is finished, I will go through and pull those pieces out and brush them, pull those foils and brush them, because when they're done, right? The last thing we want is to create any breakage on a client. And when we have trouble with those sections in there, then it really affects the look that we're going for. Okay, so I'm just gonna set one more back here, but I'm gonna give it some depth, okay? So I'm gonna place one that's a lot, let's see, I would say about 1/4 to a 1/2 inch, probably a 1/2 inch through here, so I can have a little bit of depth set back with those pieces, with these pops in here. And it's going to connect into this very front piece, because I'm going to make sure that I grab from that front section my first, rather than starting in here, right? Because you'll create depth from that hairline piece. So I want to make sure that they all blend. Most of the time when I'm weaving, I will always grab from here to here, right? From the very front of that section to the back of the section, because it's going to be connecting from to your previous sections. All right, now I'm again going to still keep going up. I'm not doing any feathering through here. I'm going all the way up, which I know is different for a lot of people. They usually start feathering in here, but I want to tackle that with the tap. And like I said, I want this now I want to give Blair a little break from feeling like she has to get her hair done all the time, right? Our blondies, they're so ingrained. She even asked me, do I come in every 8 weeks, right, for my blonding? And I want to just give her a moment I want her hair to breathe. I want her color. I want her to embrace her natural just a little bit within that. And this is her winter blonding session. So I'm still going to take that all the way up, and then I'll soften it with a tap, versus if I start feathering now and she grows, 2 inches, it's going to feel too grown out for her. All right, last one here. I'm going to go this direction as well. Remember I said, like, if we're mixing up the way that we take these, we won't have all those stripy lines happening. So I'll do one more behind here with a little depth to it, about 1/4 of an inch. Drop the developer down on these little babies in here. And by how I do that, you guys, is I just take my 10 and I just put a little splash of my 5 in there. And so I'm anywhere from, probably about a 7 volume, I would say, to just be super mindful that I keep her hair really healthy. I use very little product too. That's going to help with any bleeding. And then it just gives me a chance. I'd rather put more product on there than feel like, oh my goodness, I just made a mess in here, or I overlapped and now I'm trying to wipe it off, right? Just enough to like hold it that I can let go. And now I can lift and push those little guys out of the way and just paint where you see some depth. Taking that time to keep your client's hair nice and healthy. Okay, so we'll kind of wrap that up, and that will be it for that section. So we ended up with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, okay, foils through that side. Now I want to talk about this section real quick. On my winter blondes, I leave this depth in here, okay? Because again, like I said, naturally, we're not in the sun as much. Like sure, we're pulling our hair up, but it's not seeing the sun the same in the winter that it does in the summer. So I really like to give that a chance. Again, get it grown out, get it healthy. You know, sometimes these little pieces in here, they go through a lot being pulled up in a ponytail. So what better time than now to just, you know, give it a second, give it a beat, let it get healthy, and we're really just gonna keep everything light and bright around our client's face so they don't feel like they're not blonde anymore. Okay, so I'm going off of a center part here, and I would say do a center part on every client, regardless of where they wear their hair. However, I have also done it off of a deep side part too. The goal here is to create a little bit skinnier of a piece that just gently kind of frames their face. Again, so you're not giving them a really harsh grow outline. It's so much easier to deal with something a little skinnier. If you come in close, actually, Serena, you can see kind of from my last placement on her too. It's really just subtle, and then it kind of kicks back from there. So that even though she's grown out, this isn't like she can't stand it, right? And that's the goal here for our clients, giving them something a little different each time. All right, so I'm gonna start my first one. Now we're gonna pivot like this. We're gonna start here. Here's my pivot section. We're gonna go here, so we make sure that we cover this and it connects here. And now we're gonna slowly pivot back from there. So I still get an impact here that's blonde, but I'm not creating all that, you know, work at the top and in the crown. So we'll stay pretty skinny with this front piece. And again, I'll only use like my 7 volume through here. Really keep it nice and gentle. And I'm gonna do, I mean, this is definitely considered a back-to-back highlight, right? Where I'm going straight off of, it's taking straight from here. But I'm not concerned with like, I'm gonna go all the way to the root on her, but I'm not concerned, again, with it being crazy because this is gonna help create a little bit of softness, those pieces that you kind of drop out. Go here, and this one is square, straightforward. This is like my guide piece. Okay, go in there and apply. Little product, and then I sort of will brush it down, but all the way up as best you can. And then just kind of looking to see where there's any little depth, and I'll just lightly paint that down. And stay off of those other little fragile guys. So this, I feel like, is a technique we do a lot in LA. I work at 901 in West Hollywood, and we are probably more known for our blondes, I would say. And we do this technique a lot. And it definitely has been something that has brought us clients from all over, just because it's something that's different than what a lot of people, you know, you feel like, oh, your blonde client just always wants to be blonde. But I promise, every client that I've slowly kind of worked into this has been like, oh my gosh, that was so fun, right? It was almost like our clients that came out of quarantine that were like, I saw my natural hair for the first time, you know, and whatever. And this is kind of the same thing with that. Now, if you have a client that has gray that you blonde up, now Joico has their new Lumi 10, which is 10-minute gray coverage, which is so awesome. So I would do this same technique, and then I would do the 10-minute gray coverage process, and almost use it like a slight little tap, too, on those blondes. And then you don't feel like you have to then keep packing all those highlights in all crazy. Has anybody tried the Lumi 10 yet? I'm curious if there's anyone in the chat that's given that a try. I've been loving it, and it's, again, like, this is sort of an express service too with my blondes. And actually, sidebar, that's another thing my blondes love, is they're not in my chair for 3 hours because I'm blonding their entire head. But same thing with the Lumi 10. It's been an amazing express service that I can add on. and I can give them this and their base, and they're in and out the door. And it doesn't feel like then they're sitting with a base processing, and then we're washing or anything like that. Okay, so last one here. So that was 2. I just want to show you guys 2. Serena, if you come in really close. When I'm grabbing this sectioning, remember this is my pivot. So I'm going off of this piece here, and I want to keep it pretty skinny. And then when I'm coming back, we're connecting. So we're almost creating like a slight little triangle in here. Okay, so there is, it goes skinnier to thicker. And then when I weave, I'll be creating that same thing. So I have my small money piece that turns into a beautiful pop through the end. So we'll go like a skinny through here, and then we start getting a little bit denser as we grab through the back. Let me put the foil in so you guys can really see how I'm drawing. And now it's like I'm using that technique, and it's giving me this result without having to then go in and do a ton of tip outs or anything like that. So we go skinny, 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 and then I start getting bigger with what I'm grabbing. Okay, and it's all working in a triangle shape. So we go skinny to wider with our sectioning here. Still using, in here I can use my 10 volume. I'm going to be painting all the way up to the root. I'll turn my brush sideways just for control here. Some people want to go in and push it in, and that's fine too. Just a technique preference. But sometimes I like to pull the hair down when I do it, especially if I don't have my assistant holding the foil with me. And I really like to pull and then drag that product down. And I do little product, and then I add where it's needed. Just sort of paint in on these pieces, brighten those up ever so slightly. I'm doing our best to not overlap. If there's a piece that needs a little extra brightening, I'll kind of kick that up, and you can see, especially when the hair is laying right next to it, you can be like, oh, that doesn't need it, but this does. So sometimes I like to do that in there as well, and then tuck that away. So as far as how many you do for the hairline, this is what's going to determine the size of the piece in the front. Now, Blair, like I said, just has a normal rounded head, right? But when I have girls that really fall far forward, I'll always drop this hair and like, let's see, do we need more blonde through there? Is this pushing forward? I feel like my forehead's kind of more like that, where I have to go a little bit farther back to really see my pop piece, or this hair tends to cover it too much. So always drop your sections. That's another really thing I'm really big on, is dropping your sections and seeing where the hair falls to make sure you have enough coverage. So I love where this is at, and she only needed those 3 pieces. Now the last little thing I'm gonna do, because these 3 in here just created this beautiful kind of fan happening, I wanna connect some of these pieces with that. So I'm just gonna add a couple tip outs right in between. So I'm dropping, that's kind of that bottom section. I'm gonna add 1 in here. And I really just want the strength, the strong hair. So I take the whole section and then I lightly tease. So anything that's not strong enough is gonna fall out, okay? Or anything that has been, cut in with some layering or whatever. I really only want this to be, and you guys will notice, those of you that do that technique where you grab the whole section, you'll notice too that the dark hair is what is just naturally left out. So it kind of just like helps all around. Makes your job that much easier, because then you can pull that section out. All right, adding my 10 volume here. Because this is farther away from her body, I notice that the tip outs tend to get, they'll be colder, right? So if you stay a little bit higher in your developer here, that's totally okay. And then I like to keep them, because her hair is so long, I like to keep them long and skinny rather than folding them up. Now I'm gonna stick with this same angle, because this is how we've created this foiling pattern in here. And I'll do another tip out through here. And making sure that all this is going to lay and connect together. Okay, so same thing, I take that whole section, just slightly lifting up what wants to kind of come up, and then you see what's left out is what needs to have a little brightness, and I know that then this is the strongest of the hair. Okay, and we'll kind of go. This too is like almost a visual thing, and I prefer to leave these long because of that too. I can kind of see like, okay, if this one's starting in here, I'll take this one a tiny bit higher so that we're always visually connecting our pieces. When you do minimal foiling, it needs to connect, right? It's so much easier when you're blasting someone with highlights and you're doing a ton in their whole head. Sure, that's all gonna connect, right? Because there's so much. But when you do minimal placement like this, you need to be mindful that each one is intentional, right? Each foil then has a purpose. And it doesn't look like when we drop our hair, she's like, oh, it's just a chunk over here. Ooh, there's, you know. So really have that visual and pay attention to your placement there. Okay, we'll do one more here. And then we'll start that same process on the other side. So this one feels a little heavy, a little bit thicker. I'm going to take out that top section. So I'm probably working, my tip outs on her hair are in the, I would say about an inch is this section in here. Now, if you have someone who has super dense hair, I would go less than that because you won't get the same effect with this type of teasing. You just won't be able to pull up all the hair that shouldn't be in there. See how that kind of just falls out naturally? Then it's like, that won't make impact anyway. So why put color on it, right? Don't want to create any damage that doesn't need to be there. I'm gonna up my developer just a tiny bit on this one. You can see how much darker this piece is. So I'm upping that just slightly to 20. And then I love to leave my strands as long as possible. So even if I kind of go past the tips, I'll first do my feathering, little huck this way. And then I'll pull the foil down in order to finish the ends, rather than doing too much swirling. And sometimes it's unavoidable, I get it. You have to wrap up the end, just with how long some people's hair is. But when you can, leave it as flat as you can. I just feel like the ends of the hair are already going through so much. And I find too, then I have less tangles when I'm, taking the product out, everything. So working clean and working neat. And with a technique like this, you have plenty of time to do that. That's really, now we've added 3 tip outs. We have 3 on our hairline here, and we had 6 below. Like, it's honestly so fast that you can take your time, make sure it's right, okay? So we'll do the same thing now and repeat on the other side. I want to just touch on real fast a couple different toning things that I'll do, and one other foiling tip that if you need to, okay? So Blair's hair is, like I said, like a level 7. So her hair is dirty right now, so it actually even looks a little darker than it is naturally. But on my brunettes, I add one more step to this, and I would just want to make sure that I include that for you guys. On this last section, so I have my 3 pivot method pieces. I will take, so let's pretend these 3 are placed in here, and we go back to this section as well. I create one little, what I call a veil piece, okay? Now the veil piece is where I'll go back to my mohawk section. Sorry, Blair, your hair is so long. Go back to your kind of like your traditional mohawking section once those are in. And you're gonna add 1 foil that goes this direction, horizontal, again, just to break that up. Okay, so I would go straight across here. And depending on how dark they are, you can add 1 veil one or even 2 if needed. And what that does is that's going to help just soften your pivot hairline. So I'd go in here, I would just do skinny sections, a skinny light type, and I would place across this way. I'm not gonna place it quite yet because I gotta go in and do this side real quick, but it would do here. I would go here and I would feather. So visually, now if you can picture this, okay? We'll take these pieces. Now this has a soft little highlight to it, and what it does is it's falling right over the top of this bright, beautiful money piece. So it's almost creating that little tapped shadow for you, and then it's dropped down in here, so it's then connecting and falling right into her hairline piece. So a lot of times we can do these techniques and it's not even the color that we're using to soften. You actually can keep using the hair as another little buffer to create softness with those foils. And then it just grows out so beautiful and so natural for them. So I'll get started on the other side. Please ask any questions that you have. This side's gonna be a repeat. So if you guys have any questions, please ask. I'll chat with you guys a little bit about my toning formulas, just so you guys have an idea of what how I switch things up for winter blonding as well. I start to slowly add more warmth into my clients. Now, you definitely are going to get those clients that are like, no, I don't want anything warm. I don't want warm. I don't want warm. Like, okay, fine. Keep them platiny. Keep them blonde. That's fine. We all have them, and sometimes they just need it. So you just give it to them, right? But on Blair's hair, what I love to do is slowly start adding warmth to her. And sorry, I'm gonna pause and chat about the hairline too really quick. So you guys see her hairline's even a little bit different on this side. So I wanna make sure that when I'm coming in here, I'll use my weaving comb to kind of find that weaker spot. And that's right now where I'm gonna have my guide. Do you guys see how I find that? And then I'll just kind of clean that up and make this a little more perfect in there. That's how I'll know that's where I need to start to make sure I'm tackling her whole hairline and getting it all complete. And I don't know if you guys have that happen where sometimes, you know, that the part where it kind of comes forward on our clients, sometimes we miss that, right? When we get so ingrained in just following our perfect, you know, section where we're like here and then mohawk and we're here, and we miss that. So then when you pull it up in a ponytail, you end up having dark spots. So that's kind of how I've been able to always create that flawless hairline. And going right to the top of the ear there. Okay, so sorry, back to toning. So I'll start to kind of slowly, and yes, we love our ashy blondes, but in the winter again, when your skin is not as tan, it is sometimes too much for some clients, right? It looks a little like it almost washes them out too much. So I really try to, you know, explain to my clients, a toner is not permanent. You know, for your winter blonding, let's slowly start to warm you up a tiny bit, and see what you think of it. And then if they want to come back in and get a different ashy toner, okay, fine. At least it wasn't anything permanent that you did to change. So what I'll do on Blair typically is just a straight 10V. And so now what I'm going to implement is my 10NW and also my 10V. So I'm only warming her up a half step, right? Like a little bit. I'll still lift her to the same level, to like that pale yellow, level 9. Rarely do I actually lift to a full 10 unless I'm doing platinum. But I'm using that warmth to my advantage, even though I'm using a level 10 toner. Okay, so taking into the consideration, she's still gonna have a little warmth left in her highlight, in addition to adding the 10NW into our formula. It's not gonna be drastic, but it's going to soften her blonde for her winter blonding. Another favorite of mine when we start going in, you know, we have our brunettes that like to be blonde too. The 7NW with a 7N, I absolutely love. And if you guys are familiar with Joico colors, they tend to be on the cooler side already. So their N is super cool. actually, for being an N series. And so just knowing that about the product, it's going to ash things out for me ever so slightly. And then I can keep the balance in there with whether it's the V or the NW. So just knowing that about your toners, whatever line that you use and love, but if you're playing with the Joicos, the NW has been such a fun color that I absolutely love using in the winter. Okay, so we have our 3 until now you can see her hairline starts to change. So this is now where I'm gonna go and I'm gonna start changing my pivot, right? So I was going off of those guys. Now I'm gonna start pivoting this direction, and we're going to have then a perfect hairline for Blair. I will, once we get her processed, I'm going to get her washed, and I'm gonna follow with my Pro Series 2. There's a second step to the Defy Damage, and then I will get her tone. We'll tap her with a 7N, because like I said, it has a cooling result to it. And then I'm going to do 10NW and 10V for her all over tone. And I will make sure that I post my befores and I will post my afters for everyone to see. And I believe that Joico will share those as well. So that will be here for you guys. Okay, so we got that hairline set in there. Now this is, remember where I come in and I set my depth piece, okay? But I'm still working on that pivot. So that hairline, so it's a little skinnier in the front and wider towards the back. And it's just gonna help to create a little bit of depth next to that, but I'm always making sure I grab from the front of this section and I make sure I finish my last one at the front of that. Okay, so from here to here, always covering that.
Do you use equal parts of the 10V and the 10NW?
Yeah, great question. I do, actually. If I had a client that, you know, every now and then we have those clients that just don't lift, they don't lift great, right? It doesn't matter if you, and a lot of times I find that's maybe like over permanent colors, right? Like their yellow is just a little harsher of a yellow. Then I will kick up the V just ever so slightly. But typically when I'm working on a blonde specifically, that doesn't happen. So that I guess would be more on my brunettes. I will mix equal parts. And if you guys haven't tried the NW series, I recommend trying it on its own too. It's honestly so, so beautiful, especially if you have a client that, or a friend that's like, yeah, I'm down to switch up my blondes. We get so programmed into using and ashing out everything, right? Ash it out. But we have to remember too, the science behind the warmth, refining warmth. That's why I like to leave a little warmth in my highlight. To me, it's almost like when you get something too, where you remove everything, it almost has this dullness to it, right? So it's like keeping a little bit of warmth in there is what gives us that beautiful shine and reflection. And it's just, I don't know, people get really scared of anything, right? Ever since our clients learned the word brassy, it's like, you have a beautiful blonde come in and they're like, I'm brassy. You're like, oh no, sad, it's not brassy, you know? So I just really recommend playing around, and I feel like winter is such a great time to do that with your blondes. Okay, this last piece back here on the hairline, remember we're just connecting now. The one in front. And I drop this is the one where I drop that developer down to like a 7. This is kind of just like your safety piece in here, right? Sometimes girls don't have as long of pieces right here as Blair does. Blair's really good. She's so gentle on her hair, even though it's long. You know, she's not blasting this with the flat iron, but some of our girls in here, their pieces are like so short, right? So this is a good idea to have a full length piece as that safety piece. If you don't create that in there, it's gonna be missing. It's gonna have a gap still because of the shorties just don't translate and lay back. I get a lot of new moms that have lost a lot of, you know, hair through here that is growing back. So that's again where I'll end up creating more like 3 within this section, because you have to have the full piece for it to connect, right? Otherwise, it just doesn't translate and it looks like breakage more than anything. Okay, so now I'm going to continue in to this front section, and I'm going to make sure that I'm drawing all the way from that corner to this corner to make sure that now this foil and this foil all connect. And she's going to have a beautiful, perfect little face framing piece happening through here. And I take from all the way from that back section. I'm still just working with like a skinny light, and make sure you take all the way to the front of this one as well here, so it can connect. That way, this is what I was saying in the beginning with the center part. I do that for balance and just for timing purposes too. But if your client doesn't part here and you don't connect those sections, and let's say she parts here, you're gonna have a hole, you know, in that section. So it's really important that you are mindful of your placement again. So really this is kind of all I would do on Blair. I might tip out a couple pieces in the back if she needed, you know, just a little bit of something happening through there. But we didn't do Blair's hair that long ago. Again, this is kind of us transitioning out of all of those super blondie highlights that she had all summer long. So I don't know that she needs much happening through there, but I want her to always feel like she's at least bright around her face and her hairline, and that's what keeps our blondes happy, right? They feel like, okay, light and bright away from my face. People tend to pull their hair up more in the winter, I feel like, you know, they're doing holiday parties, whatever it is, that as long as you're keeping them light and bright around their face, then I find that they love it. Okay, connecting in here, and now this is where I'm slowly moving my pivot. A lot of times people do this technique and they stay this way, right? They forget that the piece in the front is what you're rotating off of. So it should be, this is what your sectioning should do, like this. Otherwise, you keep moving back and back and back. Now you got that like chunky 80s piece that we were doing for a hot minute. And this is also actually, if you guys do have any of those clients still, this is a great way to transition that piece out, right? Once they've had growth, then you'll start kind of incorporating this pivot technique with them. And then, for sure, do the piece here, the veil piece that creates that softness, and that will help you kind of just grow out that piece on them, rather than feeling like you're going back in, you're trying to break up the highlight, you're doing a low light, or you're trying to tap it out or anything like that, and it still just grows out solid, right? So using each of these techniques as our tools, making our life that much easier, and really then accomplishing it in one service, versus sometimes I feel like we find ourselves correcting techniques that then take way longer than what we really want them to. Okay, so see, I'm kind of going in here and I'm using that front one as my guide. That's where I'm gonna drive my my weaving comb to, right to that place.
What placement would you use on the back?
So for a tip out, I would go through and create kind of like a V pattern. So I'd probably section her right down the middle. And then, because again, when all this hair falls forward this way, right, we want to make sure that all of this lines up. So visually I have these, that now I would kind of drop these and go lower. Okay, so my placement would kind of come from a V. I would stand here to the front, so that way I can really see right where they're going to fall, rather than standing back behind your client and just guessing, right? Just bring it right to where you want it. And really, I'm so big on not clipping every single section away, because sometimes then we get so programmed into like, okay, this section does this and this one does this, you know, rather than letting the hair fall and seeing what's happened. So you see how these are moving down, right? I'd continue that right in here. Go into our next section. I'd want one dropped here and there, and that would be it, right? So, and that's all I would give her for the winter blonding specifically. There's so many different techniques I have for when I'm blonding up through the back on a blonde, but I'm really big on, my favorite's probably the quintessent technique that Ricardo and I taught, gosh, maybe earlier this year quite a bit. So Joico has all these videos on demand. You guys can go on their website. It's called Education on Demand, and there's tons of videos on there with all of our other different like blonding techniques too. But that one's probably my go-to and like my favorite. I use it all the time for a full head placement. So hopefully that helps. Okay, so I'm gonna do, this will be my last one here, and then I will show you guys that veil piece just since I have you here. And I just kind of, again, I like to, especially when I'm working by myself, I really like to pull those pieces in. And I'm kind of pushing the foil up as I pull those pieces down. I'll work with an assistant in the salon all the time, but for those of you guys that don't, just showing you that it's still very possible to get up in there. And then kind of grabbing those extra little guys that were dark. All right, so that would be my last one on the pivot section. And we'll just retouch up Blair's, well, I'd go through and do my tip outs here. We'll retouch up her veil piece just so I can kind of show you guys exactly what I would be grabbing. And again, I'm gonna drop the hair. Okay, we're balanced with our pieces here. It would be this section right here. It's almost like its own little triangle. You see that? But because Blair part's in the center, I could hit just this and that'd be fine. But if your client does not, make sure you take all the way section to section. Because wherever she's parting, you want to make sure that you're covering that distance. And I'll go a little bit larger in my section, about 1/4 inch. And I'm going to go all the way from one side to the other. It's so funny too, you can usually see where a client parts their hair because they have a tan line. So I always just make sure that I'm picking up from both sides of that tan line. And we'll set this one up in here, but the difference here, you guys, is do not paint all the way at the top. This is where you can kind of set this one, whatever you need for your veil piece, right? If you need it to be lower because you didn't set everything up high, like on a brunette, you can set it a little lower. I always will go about 1.5 inches, maybe even 2 inches away, and then just lightly feather that. Okay, if we take this all the way up here, we're gonna lose that whole pivot that we just put into place. So this is the last step, and it's only a veil. Okay, just softly put that in there, and then she's pretty dark through her ends on this guy, so I'm gonna take and pull all these in because this piece will connect, and when it drops, this piece is going to be laying with all these beautiful money pieces that we just put in there. Okay, and paint that through. All right, you guys, so if you don't have any other questions, I'm going to finish up Blair. I'm just gonna give her a couple little tip outs in the side over here, and she will be good to go. I always will go back through, and before I start anything else, or I walk away to get a drink or anything, I will always go back to my first foil and see what's happening. Okay, if this foil is done, then guess what? I don't get to take a break yet. I will start removing these because there's nothing worse than feeling like you're breaking off your client's hair. Yep, she's done. So I'm gonna jump off this live so I can get this removed, make sure we keep her hair nice and healthy. I'll post some before and afters. And thank you guys so much for being here. Appreciate you hanging out, and we will see you next time. Bye.